We've got a 30-second delay before it begins. All good? Yep. Okay, well, I just want to say a big hello, welcome. I'm Maryann Wright, and I am founder of SAPPHO Events, and we create events for LGBTQIA plus women, trans, and non-binary people. We're online and in person, so welcome. If this is your first event, then hearty welcome. If you're back for more, thank you. We've also got an online audience tonight, so shout out to them. Hello, thank you for joining us. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to these two brilliant authors. We have Laura Kay and Daisy Jones. I'm going to read out their bios and then, into the microphone technique 101. Is this good? Yeah. It's like a podcast mic where you right in the mic. Okay, I'm going to read out some bios and then we're going to have a little bit of a reading from both you. Do you want to read from here or? Yeah. No. Yeah. All right, Laura Kay is a writer and editor. She has an MA in American History from the University of Sheffield and now lives in East London with her wife and cats. In 2018, Laura was selected as one of the 10 PRH Right Now mentees, and The Split is her first novel. And this is what we are here to talk about tonight, The Split, which is an amazing rom-com from Laura. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you.
And Daisy Jones. Daisy Jones was born in 1992 and lives in southeast London also, where she studies creative writing at one point studied creative writing at Goldsmiths. She's associate editor at Vice, having previously worked at Dazed and Confused. During her time as a writer and editor, she's interviewed everyone from Grace Jones to RuPaul to Robin and Peaches. Her work, which explores everything from queer culture to music, sex, and the internet, has also appeared in ID, The Guardian, Refinery 29, and Polyester, among others. When she's not writing, she's probably reading murder mysteries, doing tarot, or spraying her stick insects. This is her first book, All the Things She Said. Welcome,
Hello.
Daisy. All right, well, without further ado, to give everyone a bit of a taster, if you've not read their books, I'd love them to do just a little reading.
Yes.
Laura,
You have to give me a sec to find an appropriate bit.
do you want me? I'll give you.
Oh, thank you.
Please mind all the scribbles.
Yeah, I was interested in what you'd written.
Yeah, I'm going to read the questions that you've got at the back. Sorry.
In the meantime, tonight we are going to be chatting about queer representation in literature and culture in general. Can I get a hands up, anyone who has read either of the books? Who has read Laura's book? Hey, oh, quite a few people. And who's read Daisy's book? All right. That's a pretty strong split between people who've read both and either or. So who hasn't read either book? All right, nice. We've got a nice mix.
They're on sale tonight upstairs.
Yeah, we're going to have signings and they're on sale upstairs afterwards at the bar, which you're welcome to join and chat afterwards.
Found it. So in the split, if you haven't read it, at the end of most chapters, there's emails back and forth between Ali, who's just been dumped by her girlfriend Emily, and she's writing from Sheffield, where she's moved back in with her dad, and she's very dramatic. So I'm just going to read a couple of their emails back and forth. So the subject is important information regarding your recent breakup. Emily, do you remember how we finally got together? Recently, I've been playing it out loud in my head like a film. Although in my version, I'm 2 inches taller and I've not spilled the dregs of a lime Calippo down my front. It was the last night of our final year, just before we all went home for the summer. We were sitting in the park drinking cans of gin and all the vodka from various bottles we'd accumulated over the year and attempting to cook things on that disposable barbecue. I remember being thrilled that your girlfriend had gone home for the summer already. I'd even heard rumours that you'd argued, whispers that it might not last. We sat around on a couple of blankets taken from our actual beds, chain-smoking badly rolled menthol cigarettes as if it was our last night on earth. God, I miss smoking, do you? I know you say you think it's gross now, but do you really? I don't think I do. The sun on my back, a glass of wine in my hand, and the first drag on a cigarette is one of my favourite feelings in the world. As the evening went on and we all got drunker, and either silly or serious depending on what we were drinking, we split into groups of shriekers and whisperers. I became very aware, from the shrieking camp, of you and that boy James. Whatever happened to James? Having what looked like a very serious, very slurred conversation. You looked shocked and a bit teary. Gin? And kept glancing over at me and then putting your head down for a new flurry of intense whispering. My heart was pounding, and not just from the Red Bull we'd been mixing with vodka. Eventually, emboldened by a swig of warm white wine, sophisticatedly poured from a box, with a new lit cigarette in my hand, I wobbled over to sit on the blanket next to you, and James asked what you were talking about. It was only when you looked at me that I realised I was significantly drunker than you. Nothing, you said. I'll never forget that moment, Em. Never in my life has a nothing hurt so much as that nothing. If at 5 years old I'd asked my parents what I was getting for Christmas and they'd replied nothing, it would not have punched me as hard in the guts as that nothing from you. I'd probably not have been so drunk in that first scenario, but still. I couldn't say I was in good spirits on the way home because inside I was almost certainly dying, but I remember being obnoxiously loud. We had a group hug with the people going the opposite way and all shouted about how much we loved each other and would desperately miss each other. We don't even speak to any of them now. Eventually, everyone peeled off and just you and me were left. I only had a dress on, and your t-shirt and jeans weren't much warmer. The cold came on all at once and deflated me. It was one of those times where in a heartbeat you go from totally drunk to as sober as a person could be, in every sense of the word. Do you remember how we walked those last few minutes in silence, and at the end of the road where we'd usually say goodbye, we stopped and looked at our feet and then at each other? You know, I'm not normally one to allow any kind of sincere moment to pass uncommented on, but before I could say anything, you stepped forward and kissed me. It was gentle at first, just our lips brushing together, but before you could get away, before the moment could be anything but real and happening to me, I put my hand up at the back of your head and pulled you right against me and kissed you, hard. 2 years worth of wanting, gone in one moment. I couldn't believe I could be so lucky to feel this way about the best person on the planet and have her feel it too.
Hey. Thank you, Laura. Daisy,
Is it my turn?
it's over to you.
I might just get a little bit more comfortable. I feel like I'm too short for chairs.
I feel like I'm inside of
And I'm worried I'm really close to you. So I think I know what.
And if both of you could just speak a bit closer to the mic, just for our at-home listeners.
Okay. Oh, you've annotated this book.
I found it very interesting and thought-provoking.
Oh, why you wrote in the corner?
Not at you. Something to explore later.
I think I'm going to read a bit from the club chapter. For anyone who hasn't read it, it's like a chapter on pop music, club culture, film, TV. Can't remember the other chapters style, but I'm going to read some from the club chapter if I can find it. Okay, here we go. It is 2008 and you are wasted. Really wasted. The only reason you know this is because you are walking through the streets of Hackney at 12 a.m. and you are singing the Charles and Eddie song, Would I Lie to You, which you usually hate. Every note comes out like a warbling screech. You continue, trying to make each line more controlled than the next, but instead it gets worse, your voice getting louder, battering the outside walls of the houses nearby. The houses with their curtains closed and their lights off and their black shadow lawns. The families in these houses have gone to sleep, but you are only just waking up. You are 16. You are 16 and wearing a bodycon dress from American Apparel, which is a shop that hasn't yet gone into liquidation or been rocked by a series of sexual assault scandals. You are 16 and your fringe is straightened and plastered to one side, which is the way fringes have been worn for most of the decade, although that is just about to change. You are 16 and you're not alone. You're with 3 people in their 20s who are taking you to a gay bar for the very first time. In future years, one of these people will become a doctor on the front line of the COVID crisis. Another will get married twice and move to Spain. You've never been sure what happened to the third. But in that moment, you are all walking together and you are singing and you cannot feel the midnight blue cold because you are 16 and you literally do not care. That is how you pronounce the word literally, as if it's always in italics. The gay bar you're walking to is called the Joiner's Arms, and it has been around for 20 years, which is longer than you have been alive. 20 years of sweat and 20 years of spilled spirits all over the floor, and 20 years of saliva and sex and smoking inside, although by the time you arrive, the smoking ban has just come into effect, and now you can only smoke outside, in a small concrete yard surrounded by stonewashed denim, swinging crucifix earrings, topless boys in tracksuit bottoms, crushed chips and dimpled skin. Inside, there's a tattered pool table that gets pushed to one side, and when people want to dance. And there's a rotten old fruit machine in one corner and a bedraggled-looking drag queen who's there every night entertaining. She smells vividly and stubbornly like body odour, but you don't care. No one cares.
Yay. Can I steal that back? It's got all my secret questions. Thank you both. I would love to start by asking just what was the genesis of the idea that led you to write your books?
So I came up with these characters that I knew that I wanted to write about, Ali and Jeremy, friends from childhood. They've like grown apart, lived separate lives, who had come back together because of heartbreak and losing their jobs and moving back in with their parents. So I sort of had the ideas for the characters first, and then I sort of built the story around them. I knew that I wanted to write about Sheffield, which is somewhere I lived for a long time, and really lends itself to writing about running. There's a lot of running in the book because it's really hilly. So if you're a bad runner, it's horrible. So it sort of grew out of them, really.
It's interesting you say that because one of the most great things about your book, I think, in terms of queer literature, is that it's not about being gay. It's that the characters are gay, and the problems they're facing aren't because they're gay. And I mean, obviously, Daisy covers this incredibly well in her book about culture and how we've progressed so far from the noughties to now. And it's interesting you say that you wrote it because of the friendship, because that's actually what the book's about, right? It's the relationship that breaks down that leads to the friendship blossoming. And and how did those characters form? Like, what was it about those two people? Because they're such vivid characters in the novel.
So I think as with probably most first novels, there's a lot of me in both of those characters, and there's also a lot of my friends. But there's also something about being that age. I can, like, here, there's a one friend of mine, and it's not about you. I promise. But there's also something about that time. So it's sort of, Ali's 29 in the book. So like sort of late 20s, early 30s, this like transitional period, and it feels like, are you going to stick or are you going to switch, sort of thing. And that's something that both of these characters are really going through, and I think it's that feeling that I was wanting to harness in them both. So yeah, that's where they came from.
And why the running?
So I'm a runner, and I knew that I wanted to write about running in some capacity. I didn't want it to be a book about running. I wanted it to be a book where people, you know, participate in some running at some point. And I knew that I could make it funny. I think there's like a lot of books about how running is a sort of cure for mental health problems. And there's like no doubt in my mind that running can really help some people. But it's definitely not a fix-all. And I really, really wanted that to be shown in this book. Like, these characters struggle. It is hard, and it doesn't fix anything. And I don't know, it sort of propels them throughout the book. So yeah, that's where running came in.
I wanted to ask that because my partner and I did the Couch to 5K over the lockdown, when we all got sent into that awful November lockdown that hopefully we've all repressed in our minds. And we did the Couch to 5K, and there were some mornings where we felt exactly like Ali and Jeremy. But the fact that you ran a whole marathon blew my mind. But yeah, there was something I thought, there's no way Laura can't have run to be able to write this detail of exhaustion and near-death experiences.
Yeah. So yeah, I ran the London Marathon in 2018, and it was the hottest year on record, which accounts for me taking 6 years to run it. I only just finished. And it was just horrendous, like one of the worst things I've ever done in my life. And the training was awful. Like, people are always like, so like, oh, it's so inspiring and blah, blah, blah. But it wasn't. It was horrible. And if I hadn't have like signed up to do it with a charity and I needed to raise money, I 100% would have dropped out. And like, I really feel like both of these characters would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
And like, running's really bad, and I really wanted to write about it.
I feel like many can relate to that. It's a very relatable book, actually, and I wondered what inspired you, because both Jeremy and Ali, the two main characters, are gay, and they come across Ali, especially when she works in a bakery. I'm not going to give any major spoilers for those who haven't read it, but she comes across an amazing old queer couple who kind of are a bit of a mentor, a bit of a safe haven for her. Not because she's uncomfortable with her sexuality, just because there's comfort in having likeness. And I wondered, was that an intentional choice to have so many amazing queer characters in the book?
Yes, and I love that you asked that, because I have been asked about this before, but in a very different way, where somebody said to me, I read your book and it's just crazy. There's gay people everywhere. And I was like, yeah, like there are in my real life, and maybe there's not loads of gay people in your real life, and like that's really rubbish. But like, I just, my life is filled with queer people, and like just most queer people that I know, their life is also filled with queer people. So it made total sense to me that these characters weren't isolated in a world of straight people. They were always going to be with other people, you know?
Yeah.
And I loved writing about that couple. I'm obsessed that you called them old. They're like, oh, like 40?
See,
like,
I just see...
I love it.
I just see Sandy Toksvig and her wife in my head. When you wrote that character, all I saw was them, literally.
I mean, that's yeah, 100%. I will take that interpretation. But yeah,
maybe also because she did the bake-offs. There's a strong connection with baking, and yeah. But no, it was. I think it's a great example, and as we move into talking about Daisy's book, especially, and going into wider queer culture discussions, like it's just such a brilliant example of what literature can and should be as we move forward, because anyone can pick up that book and enjoy it. It's not about, you don't have to be gay to read it. If you're gay, you'll probably get some more lols out of it, because there are some, queer culture moments that are special. But and I think also Queer Kids publishing the book is also a massive, like, hello, this is for everybody. We've not pigeonholed you at all. And so, I'm thrilled that the book exists and that you wrote.
Me too.
Daisy, I wondered what inspired you to write all the things she said.
Yeah, what inspired me to write it? I think when I was growing up, like, lesbian and bi culture was considered really uncool, compared to, like, everyone wanted a gay male best friend, and lesbian and bi culture was considered in the mainstream to be this, like, thing that wasn't cool. People didn't really know what it wasn't interesting outside of lesbian and bi spaces, and I think it's very different for lesbian and bi people. So I think I wanted to write about that. I think I also noticed that something changed around, like, maybe 2015 or something like that, just saying that as a vague date. But suddenly lesbian and bi culture was actually very cool, and it suddenly was, like, pushed into the mainstream, and I was like, what? How did that happen? How did we get here? I wanted to interrogate how we got to that point, but also what it was now compared to how it used to be. So I think there were lots of questions like that I wanted to look at and put in, like, an accessible book. I think when I was growing up, a lot of books about lesbian and bi culture were kind of inaccessible, and some of them were quite academic, wasn't really in pop culture. I wanted to write something that I maybe would have read when I was, like, 18 and not found difficult.
Yeah, I think, and that is so pertinent in my experience as well, having written a thesis about queerness in musical theatre. Everything I read was so academic and dry, and my eyeball was just like, droopy at the thought of it. And your book is just, the excerpt that you read almost like a novel, right? It's and then you go into these amazing conversations with, like, icons that you've all got in one book, which is also incredibly impressive. And it's just so accessible, and it's so of the moment, but also covers so much history. I don't know. I mean, obviously, as a journalist, you have been privy to a lot of those conversations already, but the way you tied it together seemed quite special. And kind of like the books that I wish academics were writing. I think the way that you phrase the need for representation is especially important, right? So you talk about film. In the book, there's discussions about film, music, club culture, dating, pretty much anything that culture touches, right? And how important it is to be seen, and how important it is for our own selves, but in terms of our confidence, in terms of feeling validated, but how important it is for helping other people understand. I think there's a moment in the book where you say, someone who watched Carol said, I didn't realize that two women could, like, love each other, like, in the romantic way. Like, they never understood that the feeling that women can feel for each other is the same feeling as straight people. And that blew your mind, as it would also, I think, blow most of our minds. And so the importance of Carol was, like, so magnificent. I just wondered for both of you to talk about why representation is so important.
Yeah, I think when she said that she never realised that two women could really fancy each other like that. And I think I'd never really understood, like, how I was like, wow, is this what everyone thinks? Like, do they just think that we're pretending? I was like, what is going on here? And I think I was like, wow, so this one film can change this one person's mind. Like, how has this only just happened now? Like, that was disturbing to me, but also I was like wanting to look at that closer. And that was a real realization for me as well. Like, did you not realize beforehand? Like, what did you think we were all doing? So that's why it's important, I guess. But also, Carol, it's like I say in the book, it's like a very specific version of what queerness looks like. Like, And it's also set in the 50s, so it's just this one film, but I thought it was interesting to look up.
Yeah, I mean, and then in the epilogue, in the afterwards, you talk about Grace Jones and how Grace Jones in like the 80s was saying, well, why are you trying to pigeonhole me? I don't fall into these stereotypes. Stop trying to like heteronormative, like put me in binaries.
You're like, why are you so obsessed?
Yeah, why are you obsessed? I mean, obviously the elegance of the argument is amazing, but it seems to be we kind of get better every year at talking about it and including non-binary and trans identities in the way that they want to be talked about, and just respecting, just honoring how you self-identify. We don't need to ask questions. We just can respect that. And I suppose that's where culture comes in, right? We help carry them along. And you say it was the 2015 election. It was the 2015 marriage equality bill in America that you feel like was one of the big things. The legal structures changing let open those floodgates. And yeah, I just wondered in because you've both written books that highlight and strengthen those stories. What is it in representation that's so important?
What do you think?
Well, I think anyone that's read Daisy's book will know that you cover this like really incredibly well, and there was something that really stuck out in your book, and that other people have written about really beautifully before, about how at the moment there is, I mean, I suppose you would say there is a lot more lesbian representation, but it does seem to be stuck in like a really particular era, which is like period drama. And it's like, I recently watched like Ammonite, and it was so boring. Like, it was so boring, and there was no chemistry between those, as far as I know, straight actors. I don't know. Well, Kate Winslet, blah blah blah. But like, Kate Winslet is hopefully bi. I don't know. I haven't looked into it. But the chemistry was not there. It was like no chemistry. Touch hands once. Have a crazy wild sex scene, and then leave and misery and sadness. And it's just that over and over and over again. And it's like that feels safe for straight audiences because they don't have to picture these queer women today walking around, being in love, living their lives. Like, it's easy to be like, oh, look how hard it was for them then. Oh, look, that's so sexy. And it's like there's something like so sexy about it being like hidden and forbidden. And it's like there seems to be this real struggle to push through to get it to be like mainstream in a way where it's like, you know, that there are films with straight people, and that I just don't quite feel like we're there yet. But I feel like that is where it gets to be really important. I could go on about this for ages. Like, sorry, I'm just gonna say one more thing. Like, if anyone here has seen Happiest Season,
yes.
So like that is something
Yes,
that people were
Stewart.
really excited about, and it was like billed as this like feel good like thing for the whole family at Christmas time, and it was for anyone who I spoke to was deeply traumatized by it. And it was like about, you know, having to like be a certain way to be accepted by this like very bleak straight family, whatever, at Christmas time. And I just was so sad that was the feel good gay Christmas movie that we were being offered. And I feel like we can do better than that.
Yeah, I agree. It was it's a very particular kind of straight white audience manifestation that they let through the gates of Hollywood. And I agree, it's just so heartbreaking. And I think Daisy, you make a very interesting point in the book where you say that there's this thing about queerness where people aren't performing for the male gaze. Like, they've not got any interest in the male gaze. It's not for them. And that is a kind of queerness that we've not seen a lot of. And that was one of those moments I was like, interesting, because we haven't seen a lot of that. I mean, I think, Laura, your book is, because it's not even about queerness, we see what it is, what the lived experience is, right? And we're not seeing that translation into a lot of films at this point. Did you want to... That was a statement. I just wondered if you could speak to like where we see us going next. Like, where are we going from here? Because we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like one thing I found difficult about writing the book is that culture, pop culture, queer culture moves like so quickly at the moment that by the time the book's published, it's like some of the things that I spoke about felt like slightly old. You know, it's like things move so quickly. I think it's moving in a good direction. I haven't seen any more period dramas, but I know that was like a massive thing. Wait, what was the question?
Where do you see us going next? Where do we have to travel to in the way that we represent queer culture?
Yeah, I think I'll echo what you said, is that it's like we've had more queer films, but they're all period dramas. They're all cis white women. They all fit like a certain mold. I think hopefully, I think TV is doing it quite well, maybe more so than films and like Hollywood. I think it'd be nice to see a different version of queerness and this like very specific mold that's palatable to certain audiences. Like I say in the book, it's like the kind of film that maybe someone's nan will find okay to watch. It's like we can do more than that. We can make it more interesting and like push more boundaries. They're not even boundaries. They're just not this one specific thing. So I hope it goes further than that. I love Carol, but I do think it also fits within that mold, but that's also an amazing film. I'd like to see more queer directors as well. I think, you know, a lot of these films aren't from queer directors. They're often from male directors, straight directors, cis directors. So hopefully that will change as well.
And Laura, where do you see the literature industry in terms of the world of books? Do you see a good future for them?
Yeah, I really hope so. I would say it is still quite niche to write sort of queer rom-coms, queer sort of family sagas. Like a lot of people were like about my book, oh, it's for fans of like Dawn O'Porter or Marianne Keyes, and like I'm like, I mean, I could hope to be as successful as Marianne Keyes, but I'm not 100% sure that like that is how queer like books are seen at the moment yet. I think that's like a lot of wishful thinking from the publishing industry, but I think that's good because from what I can tell, and I really am hopeful that this is the case, it's not a trend, although it is technically a trend at this year's book fair. LGBTQ is one of the trending book genres.
Wow, we've made it.
It's good for us. But I do think they are committed to publishing more, promoting more, and like there is some like really great LGBT sort of commercial fiction out at the moment. So hopefully more of that.
Brilliant. Well, I would love to open up to the audience for questions. Have we got any questions? Yeah. Could we steal your mic for one moment?
I was wondering whether it was like a conscious decision to make the ex quite abusive and quite manipulative, or did that happen more naturally?
I love this question. So the ex, Emily, of course, when I've been asked about this before, I have said that I most identify with her as a character. I think I really wanted for her to be flawed, and I know she has done bad things, but I think it is a very human thing to do the things that she has done. And I think Ali is also deeply flawed, and there was clearly a breakdown in communication, and I think I didn't want to paint her as a villain. I wanted to paint her as an all-rounder who made some mistakes. She sort of came naturally to me, and take from that what you will.
I love that you identify with the Slytherin character in the novel. Any more? Yeah. Would you mind? Actually, this will extend.
Hiya. I was really enjoying what you were saying about media having this really dated representation of queer women. It's historic and always ends in death and misery at the end. So I was curious, why do you think representations of queer women in culture always have this sort of sad, sort of grumpy stereotype being reinforced, whereas like I think representations of queer men in culture, they show the joy, that it's a broader story, and those elements are not really shown when it comes to the queer female experience. So I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
I mean, I don't know. I think this is an interesting question. I think I explored it a bit in my book. I can't remember what was said, but I think it's like I wondered whether it's a way, I know this sounds dramatic, but of like punishing female characters for exploring their sexuality in like a free way. I think subconsciously maybe people not realising the joy that exists in queerness because they don't see it, and maybe if they don't experience it, those outside voices maybe don't understand the joy that exists in queerness. So that's the only way they can write about it. It's like, I think when there's these kind of doomy endings, it doesn't necessarily come from queer perspectives, it comes from outside perspectives, and I think that's interesting. And that's how they view queerness. I don't think that's necessarily always how people who are queer view queerness. It's quite mundane, joyful, a million different things. So yeah, does that answer your question? I don't know. It's yeah.
I actually agree with you, and that's really interesting.
It's something I've wondered as well and thought, like, why is that? Like, that's not how I necessarily experience queerness all the time. It's not how anyone always experiences romance, regardless of like what your sexuality is. So it's strange, yeah. I'm still not sure, but
I suppose we all have to get writing, right?
yeah.
We all have to start making our own narratives, although it sounds like it's a nightmare to get anything produced, but we have to start somewhere. Have we got any questions from online? If anyone's joining us online, please type in the chat and we can ask your questions as well. Any more questions? Yeah. Would you? Yeah, shout it out and I'll repeat it.
Okay, I'm going to try and formulate it, but there's just a really interesting bit in Daisy's book that I really loved, and it kind of encapsulated, I think, mine and a lot of friends' experiences, but we haven't been able to vocalise it until the last kind of few years, which is like coming to terms with your sexuality when you're in our generation, which was like I guess 5 years ago or something. Doing it alone and like in your private space and kind of finding these YouTubers or like finding this queer media, in like in your bedroom, and maybe finding some online community but not necessarily in real life. Now obviously like a lot of Gen Z, it's a lot easier to maybe come out. I know there's a lot of other difficulties with that, and especially for non-binary folks and trans people. But what do you guys think about that difference, and what it might like mean for culture going forward and like representation going forward? Because it is such a different experience. Sometimes I watch like films. I saw this really beautiful film called Sweetheart, which was at the Flair this year, and I found myself almost like jealous or like sad in a way, because you see it and you're like, wow, if I had this like beautiful representation of like a lesbian on film when I was 14, it would have made things so much easier. So yeah, just a thought.
I'm going to try and repeat that. It was, I think if anyone wants a question, I think we'll give you the mic, because that was so beautiful. I don't think I'll do it any justice. Essentially, it's a question of the difference between coming out maybe 10, 15 years ago and coming out now, and how it seems, it's almost like there's a jealousy that it's so much easier now, in reference to Sweetheart, which was just at the BFI Flair Festival, and questions on that.
Yeah, it's weird. I feel like, I mean, I'm going to turn 29 next week. And I feel like there's a massive difference between people my age and people who are like maybe 23 or something. It's like been like a massive jump. And when I was at school, like being a lesbian was like, it was just like a really embarrassing word. Like you didn't use that word. Like it was an insult. And I hope that it's not that way anymore for like teenagers. And yeah, I do feel jealous. I also feel very happy about that fact. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, I went to an all-girls school, and lesbian was like a swear word. Like, if someone sort of tarred you with that, oh my god! Like, trying to get rid of that label was like torture. And I just, yeah, I agree. It's not the same now. Like, there's so many different resources, and like, if you like TikTok, for example, which is like always on my mind. If I'd have just, gone on TikTok once when I was 14 years old, I'd have immediately been like, oh yeah. And there's all these people that are out here living lives, and they're like
happy and healthy and accepted, and just I would have had that, and there was nothing. So I feel the same, and I saw Sweetheart and I loved it. And it's like, it's not a story about being gay, it's a story about being a teenager and like a brat. And it's almost incidental to the plot, and it's just a gorgeous film. And yeah, if there had been more stuff like that, it would have certainly been easier.
Come on, I know there's more questions in you guys. Yeah. Would you mind speaking into the mic?
Hi. I really liked what you said about different representations in media and how that's changing. And I just wondered kind of what literary influences had inspired you both, and sort of in your current work, and any future ones as well.
I'm very, very bad at this. No. I'm a bad reader and a good watcher, so I'm hoping that you have some.
Okay, great. I've just finished writing my second book, and thank you. And I read both of Casey McQuiston's books during that time, and really enjoyed them. Really fun. There's not always loads of fun in books about queer people, and I really enjoyed that. Daisy and I both did an event with an author called Melinda Lowe, who wrote Last Night at the Telegraph Club, which is a really incredibly beautiful book. And again, like, there's fun and joy in that. It's set in the 1950s, but it's so no, stick with me. But it's just so beautifully done, and it's about a Chinese American girl growing up and, you know, being obsessed with drag kings, and it's just like really cool. And so I'm obsessed with her. There's loads of great queer authors at the moment, and I can only think of those two.
Can I shout out Detransition Baby as well? That was so good.
So good.
It was so, like, I don't know, like, smart and silly and cool, and just a million different things that I didn't realise I needed until I read that. That's one of my favourite books of, like, the past. When was it released? 2019? Past couple of years? Anyway.
Yeah, God, amazing. That seems to be just last year, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a question. What is next for you both? Are you writing any more?
Yeah, I'm trying. But I'm also like, because I work for Vice as well, so I do like a full-time job at the same time, and so it's like juggling like a million different things while also trying to relax during these hard times. But yeah, I am working on another book, and I think the next one will be fiction rather than non-fiction. Because,
oh, cool.
Like we were discussing earlier, like there's only so. I mean, I can't do like lesbian 2, like lesbian 3. Like, there's so many things.
In 10 years, you could.
Yeah, maybe in 10 years I'll return. But yeah, I think the next for me will be fiction. But.
Cool.
And I have got a second book coming out in May next year. And I think there's going to be like lots of announcements about that soon. It's like just finished and the cover's on its way and all that exciting stuff.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow, how exciting. Can you give us any spoilers about what kind of book it is?
So it's a queer rom-com about a lesbian therapist with a messy love life.
Nice. Yeah. Take the mic.
What advice would you give to aspiring writers of queer fiction working on debut novels?
First of all, finish the book. Finish the book, put it away for 2 weeks, bring it back out, edit the book. And then when you're happy with it, if you trust someone enough to read it, have someone read it who you are not going to get really, really mad at for saying this bit's rubbish or whatever. And then when it's as good as it can be, start approaching agents. And I would say with that, approach agents who are publishing queer fiction. Because there's like a lot of really great agents out there, and then some that are not as great. And you definitely want to find yourself with someone who's on the same page as you. And I would say with regards to like the actual writing of the novel or whatever it is, short story, don't try and target anyone in particular. Don't think there's already this, so I should write this and then it will sell. If you love what you're writing, write that, because that will just shine through.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you said. I'd also add to, I think just for writing in general, like write in your own voice, how it comes out organically and naturally. I think it can be easy when you first start writing, or for me anyway, that you sort of slightly copy people that you really love, or even accidentally sort of try and sound like the people you love. But I think the writing works best when it comes out organically and almost like how you would say it. Like if you can read it out loud and it sounds authentic in your own voice, then that's a good sign.
I reckon we I reckon we have time for 2 more questions. Yeah? Do you want to shout it out?
What's one of your kind of favourite things that you remember from, say, around that time you were talking about earlier, 2008? Is there a place or a night or a kind of something queer that really sticks in your mind?
So the question is there something from 2008 that really sticks in your mind? 9 or 10.
Oh, 9 or 10. I think I just felt so much more free. Like I grew up around this area, so the place I'm talking about in the book is from what's sitting above us. And I remember I just missed the amount of clubs there were, which sounds like a really old person thing to say, but I miss the sheer volume of queer clubs that there was, and how you could like be like, what should we do on a Friday? Like, should we go there, then there? There was no Uber then, so it was like, then we'll get like a Addison Lee or walk to the next destination. So I really miss the sheer amount of options that there were. I don't think there are so many options now. I also don't know whether it's because I'm like nearly 29 and maybe I'm not plugged into those options in the way that I was when I was 18 or 17, 16. But yeah, I missed the choice that we had. And also not being online, I think I missed that as well. Like I didn't check my phone or look on Instagram, like I just got out, I had a BlackBerry and like a Nokia phone. I think I missed that as well.
Yeah.
I'll answer as well. Well, I was just to say, like, the last event that we did together was about queer spaces, and I talked a lot about in 2008. I just started university, and there was one gay club in Sheffield, and it was called Dempsey's, and it was, I mean, perfect, and like exactly what you'd imagined from the one gay club in Sheffield, and I spent a lot of time there, and I miss exactly the same thing. Like there were photos taken on digital cameras that now no one will ever see again.
Before MySpace came and ruined it all. Although where are our photos from MySpace now? Don't know. Somewhere in the ether. All right, I reckon we've got time for one more question if anyone's got one. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, shout out and I'll repeat.
So I have a child, and I watch a lot of children's animation with him, and I see a surprisingly more amount of queer culture represented in child's animation than I do in grown-up Hollywood films, which in the long run is a great play, because children will grow up seeing it and knowing that this is completely normal and everything is fine. And I love that representation. However, I'm saddened when I see Hollywood films, and it's, as you spoke about earlier, whether it's queer representation is either comedic or tragic, and there seems to be nothing in between. There's no great portrayal of a queer family just living a nice life and having a good time. It's either something horrible happens or something really funny happens, and it sort of saddens and worries me that while it's working for children, why can't we make it work for adults? So and again, I do apologise. I don't think I actually have a question. And I'd like to hear sort of like your idea
The question and statement, important statement, is that your child gets to see a lot of queer families and queer representation in the children's animation that they're watching. However, when you see films for adults in Hollywood, there's almost nothing. And if it is, then it's either made at the butt of a joke, or they get killed off in the old stereotypes. Bury your queers. And so it's kind of like, why do they get it, and why do we not? If kids can handle it, then surely adults can, right?
Yeah, I don't know whether. I mean, it's like I don't know enough about either Hollywood or children's TV programs. But my initial thing is probably money. It's like everything's about money, and if the people who make the Hollywood films think that something is going to make a certain amount of money, and people still don't think that queer stories make money, even though they do, that they're not going to take those risks. So in my mind, that's probably why that happens, because that's what everything boils down to, really. Still.
I mean, I totally agree. I don't know enough about it to talk about it, but like properly. But I would imagine like they're targeting parents rather than children, and I guess there's like a certain type of parent that's gonna like want that kind of content. I don't know any children.
Children?
Well, I think it's fair to say that we've got a lot of things to improve on, and the Hollywood industry gets a lot of things wrong. And I think a point that you make, Daisy, in your book is that there is a much bigger audience out there than people think. And as soon as you make stuff for them, they come alive. So I've always said this, there is an untapped financial market in queer stories. So it's just going to take a really clever producer and writers and so on and so forth to start tapping into that market and make the dollar. All right, well, I think that's it. Make the dollar, everybody. I just want to say a big thank you, first of all, to our wonderful venue, the Glass House, and this is the common space. They've got a bookshop. They have the bar that we're going to go to upstairs. They have recording studios. They're an incredible new queer venue. Right in the heart of Shoreditch, East London. So thank you very much to you guys for hosting us and being a home for SAPPHO Events. And thank you very much, Laura and Daisy, for your time and for your brilliance in representing queer authors and queer stories. And we can't wait to see your future books.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for our live audience and our at-home audience. Thank you for coming out on a Friday night. I hope this has been fun, and we will have a book signing upstairs. If anyone wants to purchase either books and get Daisy and Laura to sign them. And there's drinks at the bar, both alcoholic and non-alcoholic. Both options are awesome. All right, I'm Maryann Wright, and hopefully see you at a SAPPHO Events soon.